There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Exodus. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And if you notice here in the song, there's not one word written about Moses or Aaron. It's all about God. The whole song is about God. And just like all great worship songs, they're saying nothing about themselves and what they've done and how they feel. The song's about God, and it's about what He's doing and what He's done. And the Lord is mentioned 10 times in this song. And like with all true worship songs, it gives witness to who God is and to what He's done for His people. And where it talks about God throwing the Egyptians and the horse and the rider into the sea, that was only fair. Because if you remember, the Pharaoh, he drowned all the baby boys. So God is just paying him back in the same way with all his troops, who weren't as innocent as all the little babies were. And even though we think of God as being a God of peace, and He is, but like this song says, He is also a man of war. And some people, they don't like to hear that, but it's true. So with God, it's not peace at any cost, but righteousness sometimes require God to go to war. And if you really look at it, it was the Egyptians who went to war against God, and so God just went to war against them. And just like Israel here, how they had an enemy, we have an enemy named Satan. And we see that God, He has other enemies. He has like sin and He has death. And so God, He's against His enemies. And so He wars against evil. And in this song, it doesn't say that the Lord gives me strength, but it says that the Lord is my strength. And that it also says that He is my salvation. So He doesn't just give them salvation, He is it. And so this song records everything that God did for them and everything they went through that night. And when you read these lyrics, it also clears up a controversy about the parting of the Red Sea, because there are some Christians who don't believe in miracles. And I'm going to try to talk about them in their best light. So it seems like they're trying to help God out, and maybe they're trying to help us out too, so that we can believe that these events are true. But they try to tell us that God didn't part the Red Sea, but that He actually parted the Reed Sea. And there is some evidence where the word Red Sea has been called the Reed Sea. But what they're trying to say is that the area where Israel crossed over in the Reed Sea was very shallow, like 18 inches shallow. So they're saying that it was really more of like a swamp or a marsh. But that's not what the song says. It doesn't say they crossed over a swamp. It says they crossed over on dry ground. And it says they had a wall of water on the right hand and on the left hand, and it was congealed. And that this all happened in the heart of the sea, not over by the shoreline. And then when the water was brought back, the Egyptian army with all its horses, it says they sank like lead. They drowned. And that couldn't have happened in 18 inches of water, where the whole army was drowned with all the horses. That would have been a miracle in itself. And so everything that happened on that night was recorded in the song. And it was not only remembered by Israel, but like the song says, the other people in Canaan, they will hear of it and be afraid. And we will see this event mentioned by a harlot named Rahab 40 years later in Jericho. where she tells the Israeli spies that her people heard all the things that God had done for his people Israel, and now they're all living in fear. And so this first recorded song in the Bible, it became a big hit instantaneously. And everybody, they learned all the words and everyone's singing it. And so just spontaneously, they start having this big dance party. And Miriam here, she's leading the way. And you have to remember that Miriam is close to 90 years old here, if she's not past 90. And here it says that she's the older sister of Aaron. But right here, it only mentions that she's a sister of Aaron. It doesn't mention that she's Moses' sister. And this is the only mention of Miriam by name in the whole book of Exodus. So when we went through the area where she watched over Moses in the Nile, we only assumed it was Miriam, but that's because they only had one sister. So now we have this dance party and it's being led by Miriam. And so you got all the women out there and they're all cutting up and they're somewhere out there beside the Red Sea. And so maybe, they're all smiles and they're showing their moves and maybe they're having like the horse and rider, thrown into the sea or maybe something kind of Egyptian and doing these moves they learned over there in Egypt. But this was a celebration. This was a party. And it was all in honor of God and it was all full of joy. And in the ancient cultures, all the women, they would run out after a battle was won, and they would go out to meet the victors. And here, the victor is God. God is the hero. And so now after they've all cleaned up after the party, and they got some rest, Moses, he starts to lead the people again into the wilderness. And so God here, he's going to teach his people how to live one day at a time and to trust him. And so now all these people, they're following God willingly and hopefully, and they're in this walk of faith that they're beginning. And now it's 3 days later, which isn't very long after such a great victory, but they didn't find any water. And about 3 days in the desert is about how long a person can go without water and survive. And water in the desert is rare. And these people, they need a lot of water because there's 2 million people. And so then they finally get to this place where there's a lot of water, but it's undrinkable. It's bitter. And so they call the place Mara because Mara means bitter. And that word Mara is also the same word used for myrrh. And it's here we're told that God is testing the people's hearts. And it's not because God doesn't know their hearts. It's because they don't know their own hearts. And so now all the coffee is run out and it's tasting bitter, and all the people, they're getting thirsty. And we're just 3 days before, they're singing God's praises, but now they're complaining. And they're complaining to Moses as if Moses was God and as if all this was his fault. And this becomes the children of Israel's cycle, the cycle of complaining that Israel falls into every time they have a need. But this is what God often does. God creates a need just to test us. And he doesn't test us because he wants to see us fail. He already knows what we'll do. We just don't know what we'll do. But in tests, we're always thinking that we're going to do really great until he tests us. And even often, even when we pass the test, we wouldn't have known we would have even passed it unless God had tested us. And so these tests are to let us know where we are spiritually in our walk of faith. But God, he already knows where we are in our walk. And when God tests us, it's always to change us. And it's always to bring out the best in us so we can grow. It's not to punish us because we failed. It's when the devil tests us, he does it to bring out the worst in us. But testing is how we build faith, which is what God's doing in these people of Israel here. And when we trust God and when we obey his word, we grow. But if we end up complaining and we disobey him, that means we fail and then we stay immature. And the problem in these tests, it's always our heart. That's always our problem. The heart of every problem is the problem of the heart. That's for them and that's for us. And the problem for a lot of these Jews is that they're just not right with God. And so this word that's used here for tested in verse 25, where it says, he tested them, this is the second time this word is used in the Bible. The first time this word tested was ever used is when the Lord tested Abraham, when he commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. And so Moses here with 2 million people complaining and asking, what shall we drink? Moses doesn't know. And so he cries out to the Lord. And if you notice here, it says, the Lord showed Moses a tree. So the Lord didn't show this tree to everyone. He didn't show it to the complainers. He only showed it to Moses, who cried out. And then Moses, he cast that tree into the water, and it didn't just make the water drinkable, but it says it made the water sweet. So I kind of imagine that this probably tasted a little bit like A&W Diet root beer, because root beer, it's made out of tree roots, and it's that bark of the sassafras tree. And we don't read here that Moses added any sugar, so it must have been diet. And I'll stand by that. And there are some people who try to teach that this tree is like the cross, and that how you come to the cross and the cross makes life sweet. But that's kind of going past the lesson of this passage, because what the lesson in this passage is that God heals. And just as he has healed this water, God says that he is going to heal them. He's going to heal Israel, and he's going to keep them healthy, and that he's not going to put any of the diseases on them that he allowed the Egyptians to have. And if they will listen to him, and if they will keep his commandments and they'll keep his statutes, that he won't put those diseases on them. And those Egyptians, they had some pretty bad diseases. And you're going to read later where it talks about where they had the itch. And then we know about the plagues. But I'm sure they had all these different diseases that we don't know about, but that Israel did know about. And so now God, he used this experience to teach his people. And that's exactly what this test was intended for, to teach them. But we also see here that a part of this promise to Israel is linked to Israel's obedience to God. All right, so now they've had this big test, and it's kind of like their first big test. And so they get a vacation. And so they travel a little bit further and they go to Elim. And Elim here, it sounds better than a KOA camp where they can pitch their tents by the water. It has 70 palm trees with 12 wells of water. And so you can imagine all those kids running around and playing and climbing the trees and eating the palm dates. And so this is a time of refreshing. But like all vacations, they all come to an end. And so then they're back on the road again. You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.